who can lay claim over the water. These are God-given resources. We thank God for it.
But with this comes a destabilizing rivalry, countries suspicious of each other's intentions in the battle for control of the river.
Transparency and consultation was not happening between the two countries because of some unknown fear.
Struggle over the Nile, at this time on Al Jazeera.
Hello, we still have tropical cyclone Nathan causing problems just around Arnhem Land in the far north of Australia. Pam and Alwyn have come and gone, but Nathan still lurks, and you can see more very heavy rain just around Darwin and especially to the north of the city. Some rain too making its way across the southeastern corner of Australia. Brighter skies will come in behind, but Melbourne a little on the cool side, 17 Celsius there for Tuesday. Chances of some showers too just around northern parts of Western Australia on Tuesday afternoon. These should peter out as we go on into Wednesday. And notice still having problems there with Nathan bringing some very strong winds and the flooding rains in across the area. Whereas the weather will clear away from the southeastern corner by this stage then. Sydney, 22 degrees Celsius. The rain is making its way towards New Zealand. We'll see that rain mainly affecting the South Island over the next couple of days. So for the cricket in Auckland on Tuesday should be fine and dry, 21 degrees Celsius. And even on Wednesday, similar conditions there at that stage. But the rain, as you can see, just started to push its way into the far south of the country. We've got rain, meanwhile, also affecting Japan. Rain and snow at the moment. We've got some very wet weather across northern parts of Honshu. Snow over the mountains here. More snow into Hokkaido and still lurking there for a good part of Wednesday afternoon.
Al Jazeera brings you inspiring stories from around the world, exploring innovative solutions to the environmental challenges we face.
Solutions that are unconventional and new.
From the grassroots organizations driving a green revolution.
Everyone is volunteering, they're all getting stuck in it. This is genuine community work.
To cutting-edge technological breakthroughs. Earthrise. At this time on Jazeera.
With bureaus spanning 6 continents across the globe, Al Jazeera's correspondents live and breathe the stories they tell.
We're at the Burj Al Barajni camp for Palestinian refugees.
Al Jazeera, fluent in world news.
Their breakdancing wins huge crowds. But can it help 3 young Lebanese migrants hold off deportation from their hometown of Berlin? The siblings use their talents to support their family, but their status still hangs in the balance. In a powerful tale of survival and creativity, Witness follows the performers' struggle to stay in the city they consider home. Berlin City Limits, at this time on Al Jazeera.
This is Al Jazeera.
Hello there, I'm Felicity Barr and you're watching the News Hour live from London. Coming up, Yemen's government appeals for military help as Houthi rebels continue their march across the country. A handshake in Berlin, but increasing pressure on Athens to implement structural reform. And the son of a Senegalese president and a former presidential candidate himself, Karim Wade, is jailed for corruption.
And in sport, it's good night Vienna from Sepp Blatter, but the FIFA president is about to face his fierce European critics at UEFA Congress in Austria.
Hello. Yemen's government has appealed for military help from its Gulf neighbours as the security situation in the country spirals out of control. Houthi rebels have held the capital Sana'a since September and have now set their sights on other areas like Taiz. The southern port of Aden is also in their sights. President Abraham Mansour Hadi has been there. He fled house arrest in Sana'a and is trying to establish a new government. Saudi Arabia's foreign minister says the standoff in Yemen can be resolved peacefully. He wants a political solution, but added Gulf countries will take the necessary steps if that does not happen. The security situation has seen the US and United Kingdom evacuate their military personnel, and the UN is warning that Yemen is on the brink of a drawn-out civil war. Charlie Angela reports.
This is a country on the brink of civil war. But the residents of Taiz are not going quietly, as thousands protest against the advance of Shia Houthi fighters. In return, they're fired on and tear-gassed. Their city, Yemen's third largest, was taken on Sunday, with government buildings and its international airport now under Houthi control. Yemen is increasingly divided between a north controlled by the Houthis, who are allegedly backed by Iran, and a south dominated by supporters of ousted President Abraham Mansour Hadi. Now the country's foreign minister is appealing for help from the Gulf Cooperation Council to hold back the Houthi advance.
They're expanding in territory, occupying airports and cities, attacking Aden with planes, detaining whom they please, threatening and gathering their forces. We have expressed to the Gulf Cooperation Council, to the United Nations, as well as the international community, that there should be a no-fly zone.
This is what a GCC force could look like. Originally set up to respond to military aggression against member states Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, it's a force 100,000 strong. But this conflict has already made fighters of everyday men. Here, tribal forces gather in Shabwa province to threaten Houthi forces against entering their territory. And adding more might to the fight could force Yemen into sectarian war, with foreign powers backing opposite sides. Speaking in Riyadh, Saudi's foreign minister said he hoped the conflict could be peacefully resolved, but if not, countries of the region would take necessary steps.
They have come out very clearly for President Hadi through 71 organizations and political entities and the union and many other institutions have come up strongly for President Hadi.
Either way, for the people caught in the middle, each day of fighting deepens the suffering in this impoverished country. Charlie Angela, Al Jazeera.
Well, despite not having a military presence in the country right now, the White House says it can still handle any security concerns. Kimberly Howcott's live for us in Washington, D.C. right now. So, Kimberly, how is the U.S. proposing to still have influence in Yemen without any military personnel on the ground?
Well, that's a question that was put directly to Marie Harf, the State Department spokeswoman, and she said that there would really be no shift in the U.S. counterterrorism operations, despite the fact that we've noted that there has been the pullout or evacuation of 125 special operations forces, and this comes on the heels, of course, of the evacuation just last month of the U.S. embassy there as well. So this is obviously going to be some significant impairing of the U.S. counterterrorism operations, but the same time, the Obama administration maintaining that they will still be able to conduct monitoring of different types of conversations that they would use or do through intelligence gathering. That will be done through spy satellites, we are told, or rather space satellites as well. We are told that also there will be armed drone strikes that will continue. This is something that's been conducted for a number of years now, specifically targeting AQAP, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula in recent years. That will continue as well, albeit it won't be from any base in Yemen. It will be from air bases in Saudi Arabia as well as in Djibouti. So the U.S. maintaining, in fact, that this will continue, that their cooperation with Yemen will continue, but it will take on a different footprint as they work outside of Yemen now instead of in country.
Yeah, and has there been any reaction at all in the U.S. to the fact that the Yemeni foreign minister has directly appealed for military aid from Gulf Cooperation Council members, and what sort of reaction is there likely to be?
Well, there was a lot of pressing by reporters in two different briefings to the Obama administration on that, not just the State Department, also Josh Earnest, the White Press Secretary, pushed on that. But right now, the Obama administration maintaining the line that really they are going to continue the status quo, albeit it will be from outside of Yemen, that they still feel that there is an excellent partnership and cooperation between the United States and Yemen. The international community, along with the United States, still recognizes President Hadi as the leader of Yemen, and although he is no longer operating out of Sana'a, but in fact in Aden, that still this is a recognition that the international community has recognized, and so the U.S. will recognize. So as a result, there really is this position and sort of a backing off of any suggestion of foreign intervention. At the same time, the State Department and the White House both underscoring that they feel right now there is a need for all of the parties inside Yemen to work towards a political solution.
All right, Kimberly Halkett live there in Washington, D.C. Thanks very much indeed. And in fact, we can bring you the very latest on the situation because there's some breaking news now about the Yemen crisis. Al Jazeera understands that the warring factions in Yemen have in fact agreed to go talks in Doha. That's at a time to be announced. Any subsequent agreement would then be signed in Riyadh under Saudi supervision. So some thought that there will indeed be talks taking place in Doha, the capital of Qatar, that both the warring have agreed to attend, that any subsequent agreement would be signed in Riyadh under Saudi supervision. With me now is Kate Nevins. She's the head of the Middle East and North Africa programme at the advocacy group Safer World. Thanks for coming in. That news just coming into us right now. I mean, we've heard warnings before that Yemen is on the brink of a civil war. Is a political solution possible? Clearly, we're hearing that these sides, both sides, have agreed that they will hold talks, but talks have been held before.
Sure. I mean, I think people have been using the phrase Yemen on the brink for at least 10 years now. And what we see is that there must be some form of local level resilience because you can't be on the brink of a civil war for that long. But what you are seeing and have been seeing is conflicts breaking out in various different governments between various different groups of people for some years now. So you've got a fairly widespread conflict. In terms of whether negotiations can work, I think that we have to see some kind of negotiated, consensus-based, legitimate political settlement. Whether that can happen right now is not clear. I don't see, personally, the Houthis or Hadi actually desiring those talks right now, but it's good to hear that they have agreed to go to Doha.
It's interesting, isn't it, because the Yemeni foreign minister has appealed to the Gulf Cooperation Council members, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, both members of that council, said that they would like to have some intervention, some military intervention.
Yeah.
How likely is it that any of those countries would agree to do that? Clearly, Qatar obviously is looking to try and broker some sort of peace deal, but what about Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, so on the face of it, I think most of the Gulf countries would say that they would prefer peace talks or negotiations. For the last month or so since Hadi escaped Houthi house arrest and moved to Aden, he's been trying to put together forces in Aden to augment the few militias that are still loyal to President Hadi, using the popular committees and other militias that are in the south. In order to be able to fight the Houthis, he is going to need a stronger force behind him. So I do understand why he's asking for that. I do suspect that Saudi would like to see the defeat of the Houthis, and whether it's possible that Saudi is already helping Hadi finance some of his operations from Aden. I think that's possible, and I think whether you're actually going to see Saudi continue to finance operations, I think that is definitely an option for Saudi.
Is it simplistic to talk in terms, as other do, of essentially a proxy war being carried out in Yemen between Saudi Arabia and Iran?
Yeah, I think that is somewhat simplistic, and also it's a bit simplistic to also put it in sectarian terms, which I think a lot of the media have been doing. Essentially what you're seeing is a national political conflict, one that's been around for a long time. Essentially, Yemenis don't see themselves as belonging to particular sects. Obviously, the Houthis have some weak support, say, from Iran. And the Saudis really have a history of backing every horse in the race. So I wouldn't say that what you're seeing is a proxy war play out. I think both, particularly Iran, but also Saudi, are able to use this as propaganda, but I don't think that this is their conflict.
Kate Nevins, really good to get your expertise. Thanks so much for coming in. Thank you. Now, the Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras has met the German Chancellor Angela Merkel for more talks on a Greek bailout extension. In his first official visit to Berlin, Tsipras warned his country would not be able to meet imminent debt payments without new help, but Merkel remained firm that there would be no new money without Greek reforms. Al Jazeera's Dominic Kane reports from Berlin. Well, apologies for that. We're clearly having a few problems with that report. Let's see if we can now hear from Dominic Kane.
A first official visit to Germany for the Greek Prime Minister. Some media outlets here had called this a potential showdown in the Chancellor's office. But Alexis Tsipras was received with the usual pomp and circumstance. Once inside, Mr. Tsipras spoke of the need to reach agreement on a European level. However, there was also a strong message for his own people.
The differences between our two countries bring shadows over us. The reparations are not just a material thing, it's an ethical issue. It's not just about Greece, it's for the Greek and German people who spilled a lot of blood in order to deal with Nazism during that period of time.
For her part, Angela Merkel repeated the message she has given Greece for many, many months.
We want Greece to be a strong country economically. We want them to have growth. We also want Greece to come out of this high unemployment. And we certainly want to make sure that this very high youth unemployment can be overcome. And structural reforms are necessary for this. A solid budget is necessary and a functioning administration is necessary. I think that's clear for both countries.
But behind all this is the reality that German economic strength is helping to keep Greece afloat. Now, a growing number of people say they've had enough.
We can help to solve their problems, but the Greeks must want this too. To give them more billions makes Greece's woes worse in the long run. You buy time, that is right, but no one can seriously expect that we will ever see that money again.
But buying time can only go so far, because Alexis Tsipras has indicated Greece could default on its debts within weeks. Which helps explain why he came to the German capital, to try to build bridges with the leader of Europe's economic powerhouse. But on the face of it, there's been no tangible progress. Dominic Kane, Al Jazeera, Berlin.
Iraqi security forces say they've discovered a mass grave containing the remains of their soldiers. It's thought the soldiers were killed by ISIL fighters. The discovery was made just south of Tikrit. It's unclear how many bodies were found, as work to uncover that gravesite is still ongoing. Meanwhile, 5 pro-government fighters have been killed and 8 others injured in an attack on sites controlled by ISIL northeast of Tikrit. Iraq's defence minister says its forces are planning to storm Tikrit city as soon as possible. The Iraqi army had paused the offensive to give any civilians left there a chance to leave.
When we see that the time is right for the Tikrit alliance, we will storm it as quickly as possible. Tikrit is in full siege. We are taking caution to not take any losses and to protect civilians in the city. The terrorists are surrounded inside the city. Their morale is low. When the right moment comes, we will storm the city without any resistance or losses.
The Afghan President Ashraf Ghani has thanked US troops for their work in his country, saying they've all left behind an individual legacy. He made the comments during a visit to Camp David in Maryland, where he's pushing for a long-term aid commitment. He'll talk to Barack Obama on Tuesday. US officials have already announced they'll keep funding security forces at...
The transition from international forces to Afghan forces has been smooth. We have endured immense sacrifice, but that's our patriotic duty. We want to thank you for the assist, support, mission, trained as a support mission because that is vital to the continued relationship and build-up of the capabilities of our armed forces.
The overall economy has been growing, and the combined security forces are now larger and more capable. That is, in fact, no surprise to those courageous American service men and women and to the contractors and others who have been committed to this endeavor.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has apologised for comments he made during the election, which were criticised as racist. Netanyahu says he regrets causing offence when he accused left-wing organisations of, quote, bussing in Arab Israelis to vote against him. Netanyahu is now expected to be nominated to form a new government. The Senegalese presidential candidate and son of the former president, Karim Wade, has been found guilty of corruption and sentenced to 6 years in prison. Wade has also been ordered to pay $230 million in fines. The court ruled that he'd illegally acquired companies and real estate while serving as a minister in his father Abdullah Wade's government. Nicholas Huck has this update from Dhaka.
Karim Wade was one of the most prominent ministers under his father's rule. His father was the president of Senegal between 2000 and 2012, and over this decade-long period, Wade was known as the Minister of the Earth and Sky. He was responsible of so many portfolios, responsible of lucrative deals involving the port of Dakar, which is a major strategic port for West Africa. He was also responsible for the construction of a new airport. And these are multi-million, if not billion-dollar deals. And this is where the opposition, who is currently now in power, President Macky Sall, say that he was involved in mass corruption. Obviously, Karim Wade, at the age of 45, was known to be very known to show his wealth very publicly, owning several properties, etc., etc. Now, since the sentence has happened, this prevents him from running in the next presidential elections. You have to remember Sunday, the members of the opposition had voted in Karim Wade as their presidential candidate for the upcoming election. But given the 6-year sentence, he's unlikely to be able to run.
And still to come on this news hour.
I'm Nicole Johnson in Islamabad, and coming up, we'll find out why the Pakistani military is holding its first parade in 7 years.
And in sport, back in the driving seat, the Formula One star cleared to return after serious injury. Singapore has begun 7 days of mourning after the death of the country's founding father, Lee Kuan Yew. Lee became Prime Minister back in 1959 as Singapore moved from British control to become a self-governing state. He took Singapore into a merger with Malaysia, but it was short-lived and the country separated in 1965. He then set about a massive programme of reform and kept tight political control over every aspect of Singapore, making it one of the most regulated countries in the world. Under his leadership, the city-state transformed to become one of the world's wealthiest economies by focusing on foreign investment and creating a highly educated workforce. Lee also introduced some of the world's strictest gun control and drug laws, with Singapore regularly among the top countries for executions per capita. Scott Heidler has more details.
Images of Lee Kuan Yew overlook mourners at the hospital where he died. It's where people have been coming the last few days to deliver their get-well messages. Now it's to send their condolences. Tony Wong is a retired civil servant. He was a teacher for decades. When he heard the news that Lee Kuan Yew had died, he was in pain. But he felt it was important to bring his 2 granddaughters here.
We always say life goes on. But what he has done for us is such a strong foundation. What's going to happen in the near future is not going to be bad.
Flags of the small nation were lowered to half-mast to honor the passing of who many felt was the father of modern Singapore. Without Lee Kuan Yew, Singapore as the world knows it may never have existed. Born in 1923, the fourth-generation Chinese Singaporean saw his homeland occupied, first by the British and then by the Japanese. After training as a lawyer in Britain, he became Prime Minister in 1959, a post he would hold for 31 years. Under his leadership, Singapore was transformed from a tiny impoverished island with no natural resources into a high-tech metropolis. Lee's strong leadership also had a darker side.
As citizens of Singapore,
Political opponents often found themselves in court. Some ended up bankrupt. Freedoms were micromanaged along with the economy. But Lee's People's Action Party was returned to power again and again, with his oldest son now Prime Minister. Through it all, he was unrepentant.
If I ran a Western-style democracy and took a straw poll and went according to the poll, we would have come to grief.
While freedoms were sacrificed, Lee repaid his people with economic miracle, sealing a legacy as one of the 20th century's most important leaders. Lee Kuan Yew's body is now here through these gates at Astana, the Prime Minister's office, for a private family wake. On Wednesday, it'll be moved to Parliament House, where in the late afternoon, hundreds stood in line to sign books of remembrance. A personal message from the people he led, while condolence notices from leaders around the world were being received throughout the day. Scott Heidler, Al Jazeera, Singapore.
A Spanish court has found the country's ruling party ran an illegal slush fund for nearly 2 decades. Spain's High Court has proposed 6 people face trial over the tax evasion allegations. Among them is Luis Barcenas, a former treasurer of the ruling People's Party. The court says more than $2 million of undeclared money was used for building work at the party headquarters in Madrid. France's political right is celebrating its success in local elections. A Conservative alliance led by the former President Nicolas Sarkozy came first. Marine Le Pen's National Front was second with just over 25%. Jackie Rowland sent this update from Paris.
It was quite a convincing lead for the UMP, the centre-right party led by the former French President Nicolas Sarkozy. The National Front did less well than some opinion polls had predicted, but then we have to remember that opinion polls are not an exact science. They're only a suggestion of voting tendencies. But very much a disappointing performance by the Socialist Party, pretty much reinforcing the overall trend that the Socialist Party seems to be losing favour. And in particular, the French President François Hollande is not very highly rated at the moment. We must remember also that this was only the first round of voting, because in France there is a system of two rounds. It does give people the luxury of maybe registering a protest vote, making some kind of a statement in the first round, while then actually getting more serious in the second round. Also, these are local elections rather than national elections. Again, sometimes people vote in a different manner. What often happens in elections in France is that if the National Front does well in a first round, generally people voting for parties that have been knocked out in the first round will then rally together and vote for whichever party is standing against the National Front. So we can expect to see lots of Socialist Party voters voting for the centre-right UMP in the second round in order to keep the National Front out. At least that would be the prediction of many people here in France.
A report from the group Doctors Without Borders has criticised the World Health Organization's response to the outbreak, saying it was too slow. And MSF has warned the global medical community is not prepared for another outbreak.
All we know is that the delay that was caused by the member states and the WHO not acting cost valuable time in preparing a response. We're in a different place today, but we should be much further along. This is not just a hatchet job against the WHO, but it's really a reflection that the world isn't prepared for an outbreak of this magnitude. And what worries MSF is that if there's another outbreak in another part of the world with similar background, similar setup to the 3 countries in West, we will have another problem and another huge problem which will cost lives.
Well, it's a year since the first case of Ebola was confirmed in West Africa. Since then, the virus has killed more than 10,000 people in Liberia, Sierra Leone and Guinea. Emeka Umolo looks at how people have coped with the epidemic and its stigma.
When Ebola was at its worst last year, Julius Proud was trying to save those he could. And that's when he caught the disease.
Fortunately, I survived it. But walking down the community, people pointing fingers at me, oh, he is the one who came down with the virus, he is the one who people say he died, and he is the one. I mean, it becomes somehow discouraging and worrisome.
Even colleagues who showed no symptoms were made to feel isolated.
My very people could no longer come around me, and I even asked them to stay away because I don't know what we're going to happen next.
Despite the stigma, Proud is back at work. He's beat the virus and says it's now time to beat the misinformation about the disease. That's what Liberia's government wants to do as well. In a few weeks, the World Health Organization had hoped to declare the country Ebola-free. But that's now not going to happen because of a new case discovered days ago. It's left many here worried.
But I feel very, very discouraged because it will carry us backward. Our children, for the length of time, we delay about their education, and to hear that there's a new outbreak of Ebola is very, very discouraging. And
Ebola has spread at an aggressive pace, crippling daily life. All schools were closed for 6 months. And in 1 year, the disease has crisscrossed borders, killing more than 10,000 people across West Africa. Experts have traced the source here in Guinea. This is the spot where it's believed bats infected a toddler, triggering the epidemic that also affects Sierra Leone and Nigeria. The countries affected hope the worst is over now. And that could very well be the case if this empty Ebola treatment center in Liberia is anything to go by. Emeka Umolo, Al Jazeera.
And still to come on this news hour from London. Caught in the crossfire, South Sudan's wildlife faces new threats against the backdrop of civil war. Agreements at last. Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan finally reach a deal on the building of a hydroelectric dam on the Nile. And in sport, the Olympic swimming champion starting an 18-month drugs ban.
Hello, not too much warm sunshine across the western side of the Mediterranean at the moment. Plenty of cloud still showing up on the satellite picture and some really lively showers too just lurking